We have a breaking news alert for you. It's finally here. The Supreme Court has made a decision on President Trump's tariffs. This is a huge case, a big ruling. It comes right before the State of the Union. And Shannon Bream, of course, is standing by with us. Shannon, do we have an initial thought on what the ruling is?
We do. We've got a very fractured opinion, but initially what it says, we know it's authored, the primary opinion, by the Chief Justice, and says essentially that this IEEPA, this law that grants the president emergency powers, did not, it looks like by this first blush reading by Justice, the Chief Justice here, does not give him the power to levy these tariffs that he's levied. Part of this initial opinion says, the words regulate and importation, the president says that gives him the independent power to impose tariffs on imports from any country, any product, any rate, any time. These words, it says, cannot bear such weight. We know we've got a dissent by Justice Kavanaugh, by Thomas and Alito, it looks like, and those were the three we thought during the arguments, if anyone would be persuaded to allow the president to move forward with these tariffs, they would be the ones to do it. So at first blush, like I said, there are multiple parts and concurrences to this opinion, but it looks like what the primary holding is going to be is that these tariffs cannot be used in the way that the president had tried to use them. Let me get you to the closing paragraph that we have in this initial opinion here. It says, the president asserts the extraordinary power to unilaterally impose tariffs of unlimited amount, duration, and scope. In light of the breadth, history, and constitutional context of that asserted authority, he must identify clear congressional authorization to exercise it, meaning if he wants to do it, he's got to show that Congress has allowed him to do it. But they say IEEPA, this emergency powers law, contains no reference to tariffs or duties. The government points to no statute in which Congress used the word regulate to authorize taxation. And until now, no president has ever read IEEPA to confer such powers. We claim no special competence in matters of economics or foreign affairs, but we claim only, as we must, the limited role assigned to us by Article 3 of the Constitution. Fulfilling that role, we hold that IEEPA does not authorize the president to impose tariffs. We'll keep reading. That is the first blush, authored by the Chief Justice John Roberts.
Shannon Bream, thank you so much. Bill Malutian is with me, and we will anchor through this hour. This is big breaking news, everyone. Yep. And Jonathan Turley is a constitutional law attorney and George Washington law professor. He's a Fox News contributor. We have been waiting for this decision. It is finally here. I don't think the White House will be surprised, even though they will be disappointed. They will probably vehemently disagree. But this is at least definitive, it sounds like, Jonathan, from the Supreme Court, that this was not allowed.
It is indeed, and this is what some of us predicted. This was a case where the administration was at a disadvantage. IEEPA does not refer to tariffs, and tariffs are a big deal under the Constitution. It's a critical form of revenue that is left to Congress. And I thought that the administration did a terrific job in front of the Supreme Court. They could not have argued this case better, in my view. But you can't really escape that language. And right out of the bat, when that oral argument began, the Chief Justice John Roberts said, this is a tax. And you could almost hear the administration gulping, because that's not what they wanted the justices to take from their argument. But Roberts and others clearly view this as a tax that rests with Congress. Now, there's a lot of runway still for the administration. We have to really get into this opinion, into some of the weeds, to see if it is prospective only, but also the administration has other tools in its toolbox. It can actually impose tariffs under other statutes. So this night is hardly over for the administration when it comes to tariffs.
And Jonathan, the Supreme Court took months to make this decision. They had oral arguments back in November. They seemed pretty skeptical about this 1977 law that the president was using to impose these tariffs broadly. President Trump has said if the Supreme Court does this and strikes down his ability to use these tariffs, it would be disastrous for the country. Talking about how are you supposed to send the money back? How do you put the toothpaste back into the bottle? What are your thoughts on that? Is the United States going to suddenly have to return the money it took in via the tariffs as part of this 1977 law that the court is saying he can't use to do this?
That's what we're going to have to dig a little deeper into the opinion to see if it is prospective only. Also, Congress has to decide if it wants to move here. The economy is doing extremely well with this administration and with the tariffs. And so the question is Congress going to move in here to make sure that we don't have to step back in terms of the progress that has been made. In any case, we're looking at years of intensive and expensive litigation unless Congress wants to intervene and try to streamline that process. But there's still a lot to be resolved. This is a fractured decision. It's what some of us predicted. You know, when I noted after the oral argument was that it seemed to me like a majority of justices were not buying the tariff argument generally under IEEPA, the statute. But they were all expressing different reasons, or many of them were expressing different reasons for their objections. So it's fractured in that sense. So we have to see how this is going to play out. But the pressure will be now not just on the administration, but on Congress, because I think that the public itself would not want to see a wholesale return of tariff money to the detriment of the economy.
Shannon Bream, you've been reading. What more do you know?
Well, so to this issue of refunds, it did come up, as Professor Turley said there during the oral arguments, this fact that there would be some unwinding in how you would do it. So whether or not the court told us in this opinion, here's what I found. We've got a dissent here from Justice Kavanaugh, and he says this, that there are other tariffs. The president's authority is not shut down with any other option, but with respect to this particular law, it is shut down. But then he goes on to say, one issue is going to be refunds. Refunds of billions of dollars would have significant consequences for the U.S. Treasury. This is in his dissent. The court says nothing today about whether, and if so, how, the government should go about returning the billions of dollars that it has collected from importers. He says that process is likely to be, quote, a mess, as was acknowledged at oral argument. So he says here, as we continue to read through, multiple pages and multiple opinions here, that nowhere does the court in this opinion address how that's going to be undone. Justice Alito also asked about this during the oral arguments, and there was real concern about how in the world you do this. Justice Kavanaugh also talks about in his dissent, a lot of those costs have already been passed on to consumers and collected from them. So unbringing this bell, the court doesn't seem to provide any guidance within this opinion about how that's supposed to be done, other than saying, under IEEPA, the president couldn't have collected these various waves of tariffs that he did. He's got, as the professor said, many other ways he can collect tariffs. I've talked to Secretary Dissent and others about their backup plans and what they would do. They know they have to plan for that, so there are other tariffs they can do. But this sweeping big bite at the apple is not going to be allowed in a 6-3 opinion here by the justices.
Can I ask you one thing, Shannon? One of the things that Jonathan Turley said is that the economy is doing fairly well. And he said because of the tariffs, I might say in spite of the tariffs, there have been a lot of different things. For example, some of the tariffs that were suggested at the beginning on Liberation Day never came to pass, or they were pared well back, for example, on coffee or groceries, kitchen cabinets, things like that. So the president is wanting to use this as maximum flexibility. You interview a lot of people that are representing their constituents on Capitol Hill. One of the things that Congress has done in the last 25 years or so is just basically fritter away its responsibilities, letting the executive branch do a lot. And at this point, do you know, is there anyone there that has the ability to go to the White House and say, here's what we can do. Let's try to pass a law that will give the flexibility, give the law, make sure that it is within the Constitution. Because the president has a chance to get this done before the midterms, but it would take a full court press and a lot of bipartisan support.
Yeah, you're exactly right. It would be a very heavy lift on Capitol Hill. But here's the thing. This law doesn't use the word tariffs. There are obviously skeptics among 6 of these justices on the Supreme Court who thought Congress ever intended for the president to have this particular power. So sure, there could be a legislative fix that you could go through to do this. But when you talk about Congress ceding its power, that's one of those things, too, that came up with Justice Gorsuch during the arguments. He said, how far can Congress go in ceding over power if that's the government, the Trump administration's argument that Congress does want him to have the power on these tariffs? Could it say, okay, we're no longer going to, maintain the power to declare war? How much could Congress give away? So he was clearly skeptical. He's got a concurrence. I haven't read fully yet, but he seems to have signed on to this idea that the president doesn't have power under IEEPA to levy these particular tariffs. But yeah, a legislative fix would be the clearest thing, and I think in an election year, probably the least likely solution at this point.
Shannon, sorry, just real quickly, who were the 3 that voted against?
We have dissents from Justices Kavanaugh, Thomas, and Alito. And again, like I said, at oral arguments, they seemed the most open to possibly leaving the door open for the president to have this power. So they find themselves in the minority and the losing end today.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.